The smell of stale beer and expensive cigar smoke usually defined the palace chop house. But tonight it smells like copper, blood, and cordite. Dutch Schultz, the beer baron of the Bronx, is slumped over a table, a bullet hole in his back, leaking the last of his life onto a checkered tablecloth. His hands are shaking, not from the cold, but from the realization that the world he built is collapsing. Click. The sound of a heavy Zippo closing. For the men in the room, the world stopped. But for Dutch, the real nightmare hadn't started with the hitmen in the bathroom. It started 48 hours earlier, with a single phone call that defied the laws of the underworld. "We have Francis," the voice had said. "No introduction, no name, just a cold, mechanical delivery. And if you want to see her breathe again, the price is $500 million. $500 million in 1935. It wasn't a ransom. It was a death sentence for an empire. It was an impossible number, a figure that would bankrupt the Commission and the federal government combined. Dutch had looked at the phone, the rain lashing against his window in the Bronx. He didn't scream. He didn't break the furniture. He just felt the air leave the room. Frances wasn't just his wife, she was the only part of him that wasn't stained by the Prohibition bloodbath. To understand how a man like Arthur Flegenheimer, better known as Dutch Schultz, ended up dying in a Newark toilet while his wife's life was being traded for the wealth of a small nation, we have to go back to the moment the shadows decided that the king of the Bronx had lived long enough. In the criminal underworld there are rules. You don't touch the families. But someone had just broken the ultimate rule, and Dutch was about to find out that his enemies weren't playing by the book anymore. 3 days earlier, October 21st, 1935, 08:03 a.m., Schultz's penthouse. The morning sun over New York usually looked like gold to Dutch Schultz. He was at the height of his power, controlling the policy rackets and the illegal beer trade. He was the man who had outlasted Legs Diamond and defied Lucky Luciano. He was a shark in a suit, a man whose temper was as legendary as his bank account. He walked into the dining room, expecting to see Francis with the morning paper and a cup of black coffee. Instead, he found an empty chair and a single white glove on the floor. It was leather, scented with her perfume, lilies. Beside it lay a note, written in precise typewriter font. "The debt is due, $500 million. No police, no commission, just the money." Dutch felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. He knew every player in the city. He knew the Italians, the Irish, and the street gangs. None of them were suicidal enough to snatch the wife of the Dutchman. This felt different. This felt like a ghost had reached out from the fog of the city. "Lulu!" Dutch roared. Lulu Rosenkrantz, his loyal bodyguard and driver, burst into the room, his hand already reaching for the .38 tucked into his waistband. "Where is she?" Dutch hissed, pointing at the glove. Lulu's face went pale. "She went out for the groceries, boss. Just to the corner. I had Danny following her at a distance. He hasn't checked in." The decision was immediate. Dutch didn't call the police. He didn't call his lawyers. He called his mechanics. In the world of Dutch Schultz, problems weren't solved with negotiations. They were solved with lead. But how do you shoot a ghost that asks for the impossible? The $500 million figure wasn't a mistake. It was a signal. Someone knew exactly where Dutch kept his mythical hidden treasure, and they were coming for every cent of it. October 21st, 1935. 02:30 p.m. A basement in East Harlem. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and cheap wine. Dutch sat across from Bo Weinberg, his right-hand man, a man who knew where the bodies were buried, because he had buried half of them. "They're asking for the ledger money, Dutch," Bo whispered, his eyes darting to the door. "The stash everyone talks about, the one you said doesn't exist." The Schultz hoard was a legend in the New York underworld. It was rumored that Dutch had a steel box filled with gold certificates and high-denomination bills buried somewhere in upstate New York, worth millions. But $500 million? That was the stuff of fairy tales. "I don't have $500 million, Bo." "Nobody does," Dutch growled, slamming his fist onto the wooden table. "But they think I do. Someone has been talking. Someone close." Dutch watched Bo's reaction. In this business, loyalty was a currency that devalued faster than the dollar during the Depression. He looked at Bo's hands. They were steady, too steady. "I want every street urchin, every bookie, and every crooked cop looking for a black Buick," Dutch ordered. That's what Danny saw before he went missing. A black Buick with Jersey plates. While the Bronx burned with the heat of Dutch's anger, a quiet realization was settling in. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was a coup. By taking Frances, they hadn't just taken a woman. They had paralyzed the most dangerous man in New York. If he paid, he was broke and weak. If he didn't, he was a monster who let his wife die. As Dutch left the basement, a young runner approached him with a blood-stained cap. It belonged to Danny, the bodyguard. Inside the lining was a message. "The Commission sends its regards. October 22nd, 1935. Row 1:15 a.m. The Waldorf Astoria, secret suite." To the public, the Commission was a myth. To Dutch Schultz, it was a nuisance. Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, and Frank Costello had created a national crime syndicate to bring order to the chaos. Dutch, a lone wolf by nature, hated order. He hated paying taxes to other gangsters. He stood in the center of a lavish suite, surrounded by the men who held the keys to the city. Lucky Luciano sat in a velvet armchair, nursing a scotch. "I heard about Frances, Arthur. Truly tragic," Luciano said, his voice as smooth as silk. "Cut the crap, Lucky," Dutch spat. "One of your boys took her. You want my territory? Take it. You want the numbers racket? It's yours. But give me my wife." Lansky stepped forward, his eyes cold and analytical. "We didn't take her, Dutch. We're businessmen. A $500 million ransom is bad for business. It brings the feds. It brings the light. We like the dark." "Then who?" Dutch demanded. "Someone who hates us as much as they hate you," Lansky replied. "Someone who wants to see the whole structure burn. There's a new group, Dutch, the Young Turks. They don't care about the rules. They think we're old. They think we're soft." Dutch realized then that he was fighting a war on two fronts. The Commission wanted him dead because he was planning to assassinate Thomas Dewey, the special prosecutor, which would bring too much heat. And the kidnappers wanted him dead for his money. He was a man walking on a tightrope made of razor wire. As Dutch walked out of the Waldorf, a car pulled up alongside him. The window rolled down. It wasn't the Commission. It was a man Dutch thought he had killed 3 years ago. October 22nd, 1935. 04:45 a.m. Under the Manhattan Bridge. The wind howled through the steel girders of the bridge, sounding like the screams of the damned. Standing in the shadows was Joey No-Face Rao, a former associate whose face had been reconstructed after a shotgun blast in a dark alley. "You look surprised, Dutch," Joey rasped. The scars on his face didn't move when he spoke, giving him the appearance of a living corpse. "I buried you in a pier in Hoboken," Dutch said, his hand hovering over his holster. "You buried a body, Dutch. You didn't check the pulse," Joey replied. "I'm the one with your wife, and I don't want your territory. I want the money you stole from the Bronx families, the $500 million you've been skimming for a decade." The number was an exaggeration, a legend that had grown out of control. Joey believed the myth. He believed Dutch was sitting on a mountain of gold, while the rest of the city starved. "I can't give you what I don't have, Joey," Dutch said, his voice low. "Then you'll get her back in pieces," Joey said, stepping back into the darkness. "You have 12 hours. Meet at the ironworks in Newark. Bring the ledger and the keys to the vault. Or don't come at all." Dutch was trapped. He couldn't go to the Commission for help. They wanted him dead anyway. He couldn't go to the police. He was alone, a king without a kingdom, facing a ghost from his past who wanted a price he couldn't pay. Dutch turned to Lulu, who was waiting in the car. "Get the iron box from the safe house," Dutch ordered, "and get the Thompson submachine guns. If we can't pay the price, we'll pay in lead." October 22nd, 1935, 11:30 a.m., a safe house in Newark. The iron box was real, but it didn't contain $500 million. It contained something far more dangerous. The names of every judge, politician, and police captain Dutch had on his payroll. It was his insurance policy. If he went down, the whole city went down with him. "You're going to give them the list?" Lulu asked, his voice trembling. "They'll kill us all just for seeing it. They want a treasure, Lulu. I'll give them a bomb, Dutch replied. He spent the afternoon rigging the box. He placed a small charge of dynamite under the false bottom. If the box was forced open without the specific sequence, it wouldn't just destroy the papers, it would level the room. It was a desperate, suicidal move. But Dutch Schultz was a desperate man. He sat at a small wooden table cleaning his pistol. He thought about Frances. He remembered the way she laughed when they were in Saratoga, away from the blood and the booze. She was his tether to humanity. Without her, he was just a monster in a fedora. "Boss, we got a problem," Lulu said, looking out the window. "The Commission's hit squad. They're outside. Albert Anastasia's boys." The Commission wasn't waiting for the kidnappers to kill Dutch. They were moving in to finish the job themselves. The hit on Thomas Dewey was the final straw, and the syndicate had voted. Dutch Schultz had to go. Dutch realized he wasn't just going to a ransom exchange. He was going into a three-way crossfire between a vengeful ghost and the most powerful hit squad in history. October 23rd, 1935. 09:00 p.m., the abandoned Newark Ironworks. The facility was a skeleton of rusted steel and broken glass. It groaned in the wind, a monument to a dying industry. Dutch arrived in his black sedan, the iron box sitting on the seat beside him like a ticking heart. He stepped out into the cold air. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant clank of metal. "Joey, I'm here," Dutch yelled. Searchlights snapped on, blinding him. From the catwalks above, men with rifles looked down. Joey No-Face stepped into the light, holding Frances by the arm. She looked terrified, her dress torn, but she was alive. "The box, Dutch. Slide it over," Joey commanded. "Let her go first," Dutch countered. "You know how this works, Joey. You get the money when I get the girl." "I don't think you're in a position to negotiate, Arthur," Joey sneered. "I have the high ground, and I have the girl." Suddenly the back doors of the ironworks burst open. A spray of Tommy gunfire shredded the silence. Anastasia's hitmen had arrived. They didn't care about the ransom or the wife. They were there for Dutch. In the chaos, Joey dragged Frances back into the shadows. Dutch dived behind a steel pillar as bullets sparked off the metal. The three-way war had begun. October 23rd, 1935. 11:15 p.m. Inside the ironworks. The shadows were alive with muzzle flashes. It was a symphony of violence. Dutch moved through the machinery like a predatory animal. He saw one of Joey's men and put 2 bullets in his chest before the man could scream. "Lulu, cover the left," Dutch barked. But Lulu wasn't there. Dutch looked back and saw his loyal bodyguard slumped against a crate, his shirt soaked in red. "Go. Get her, boss," Lulu wheezed, his eyes glazing over. Dutch felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in years. Grief. Lulu had been with him since the beginning. He was the last person who stayed because of loyalty, not fear. Dutch left him there and pushed forward, driven by a cold, incandescent rage. He found Joey near the back exit, trying to shove Frances into a car. Dutch didn't yell, he didn't warn him, he just fired. The bullet caught Joey in the shoulder, spinning him around. Frances tripped and fell, crawling away from the car. "You're dead, Dutch!" Joey screamed, firing blindly. "The Commission won't let you leave this city." "The Commission is a bunch of bookkeepers in suits," Dutch growled, stepping into the light. "I'm the Dutchman." He reached for the iron box, which he had carried with him through the fire. He threw it at Joey's feet. "You want the 500 million? It's all yours." Joey, blinded by greed even in his pain, reached for the box. He didn't see the thin wire attached to the lid. He didn't see Dutch grabbing Frances and diving behind a concrete wall. October 24th, 1935, 12:45 a.m., the aftermath. The explosion shook the entire block. The iron box lived up to its promise, turning the back of the ironworks into a funeral pyre for Joey No-Face and his dreams of wealth. The list of names, the politicians, the judges, all of it went up in smoke. Dutch had burned his bridge back to society. He stood in the rain, holding Frances. She was shaking, sobbing into his coat. "It's over," he whispered. "I'm taking you home." But as they walked toward his car, he saw them. 3 cars blocking the exit. The Murder Incas hit squad, led by Mendy Weiss. They had waited for the smoke to clear. They were the professionals. They didn't make mistakes. "Get in the car, Francis. Drive. Don't look back," Dutch said, handing her the keys. "Arthur, no. Go." He watched her drive away, the taillights disappearing into the Newark fog. He was alone now. No bodyguard, no empire, no money. Just a man with a gun and a reputation that had become a noose. He managed to slip away into the night, wounded and bleeding, making his way to the only place he thought was safe, the Palace Chop House. He thought he could regroup. He thought he could call in one last favor. He was wrong. As he sat in the booth waiting for a contact that would never come, he heard the bathroom door creak open. He didn't even turn around. He knew the sound of his own end. October 24th, 1935. 11:30 p.m. Newark City Hospital. The lighting in the hospital ward is flickering, a hum of electricity that sounds like a death rattle. The air smells of antiseptic and iron. Dutch Schultz, the man who once held the Bronx in a velvet-lined iron fist, is now reduced to a pale, sweating figure under a thin white sheet. A single .45 caliber bullet has traveled through his abdomen, tearing through the myth of his invincibility. Beside him sits F.J. Lang, a police stenographer with a notepad and a fountain pen. He isn't there for comfort. He is there to scavenge the dying man's brain for secrets. "Arthur, listen to me," a detective whispers, leaning over the bed. "Who shot you? Was it Weiss? Was it the Italians? Where is the money?" Dutch's eyes roll back, fixed on the ceiling as if watching a movie only he can see. His voice is a raspy, dry heave. "A boy has never wept, nor dashed 1,000 Kim," he mutters. The words make no sense to the law, but to Dutch, they are pieces of a shattered soul. "Frenchie, oh Frenchie, she's got the lilies. Don't let them take the lilies." To understand the tragedy of this moment, you have to remember who this man was. In 1928, Dutch didn't walk. He owned the pavement. He was a man who saw a city struggling through the Depression and decided to tax its vices. He was the numbers king. He moved millions of dollars in nickels and dimes, gathered from the pockets of people who had nothing else to dream about. He was a man who once ordered a hit on a rival while eating a steak, never missing a bite. Now, he can't even swallow his own saliva. The fever takes hold, and Dutch begins to thrash. The iron box, it's near the creek, Phoenicia, big red barn. No, the tree with the lightning scar. The stenographer's pen flies across the paper. This is the moment that birthed a century of greed. Dutch begins to describe a steel waterproof safe. He talks about gold certificates. He talks about $500 million, the same impossible number the kidnappers demanded. Was it a lie? Or was the ransom demand based on a truth only the Dutchman knew? "The commission? They think they won," Dutch sneers suddenly, a momentary spark of the old killer returning to his eyes. "But you can't own the wind. I buried the wind in the dirt." While Dutch is dying in Newark, the vultures are already picking the bones of his empire in New York. Lucky Luciano is on the phone, moving his men into the Bronx. The beer trucks are being rebranded. The bookies are being told they have a new landlord. By the time Dutch's heart stops, his name is already being scrubbed from the ledgers of the city. The impossible price wasn't the $500 million. It was the realization that in the end, Dutch was just a placeholder. He was a violent man used by more refined criminals to clear the brush, and now that the field was level, he was discarded like a spent shell casing. The sun is setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the ward. Dutch's breathing slows. His last words aren't about the money or the mob. He reaches out a trembling hand, grasping at the empty air. "I'm coming, Francis. Tell them I paid." At 6:50 p.m., the heart of the beer baron stops. The stenographer closes his book. The detectives walk out, frustrated by a map of words that leads nowhere. The ransom for Francis was never paid because the kidnappers, the ghosts of Dutch's past, realized too late that Dutch would rather burn the world than be extorted. Francis survived because Dutch became the lightning rod. She disappeared into the witness protection of the shadows, living a quiet, anonymous life in Westchester, far from the smell of cordite. Thomas Dewey used the death of Schultz to catapult himself to the governorship and nearly the presidency. The commission became the board of directors for American crime, ruling for decades. And the treasure, somewhere in the Catskill Mountains, near a town called Phoenicia. The ground holds a secret. Thousands have dug for it. None have found it. The legend of Dutch Schultz isn't about the gold in the ground. It's about a man who tried to buy his way out of hell and realized the currency was his own blood. In the city of shadows, the house always wins, and the Dutchman just lost his last bet. This story was built on the blood and grit of a New York that no longer exists. If you want more deep dives into the lives of the men who ruled the streets, click the video on the screen now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join our crew. Dutch Schultz was a monster, but he chose to die alone to ensure his wife's safety. Does a single act of sacrifice outweigh a lifetime of sin, or was his treasure just one final lie to keep us searching? Let us know your theory in the comments.